Flooders like this MS12 Mini are designed to take their light and spread it over a wide area. But here's the trick. If you put enough emitters in one light and you put out enough lumens, it actually starts to throw. Welcome back to Schul Lights. Today I've got the Imalent MS12 Mini, which is a 12 Cree XHP 70.2 emitter light. And if you know what those are, they're already compound emitters. They're basically 4 high-powered emitters in one. So we're looking at a flashlight that is the equivalent of 48 high-powered emitters. Now, 12 emitters in a light this size is pretty incredible. If you look at other lights this size, like the AceBeam X50 or the Manker MK38 satellite, they're both 8 Cree emitters. This one packs 12 in the size of those lights. If you were looking to get a 12 emitter light, you'd probably have to step up to the AceBeam X75, and it's considerably larger. So right now, the Imalent MS12 Mini is the only light this size with 12 emitters. All right, let's take a look at the box, and it is a massive box to boot. It's got this cool little sleeve that you pull off, and then underneath is a box that has a magnetic flap right here. And when you open it up, inside you've got the manual, you got a dedicated charger, you got a baggie with spare O-rings and parts, you got a holster, and inside the holster is the light itself. Now, when you first get the light out, I want to point out that there's going to be a film on the lens, which I had peeled off, and I just usually stick it on the inside flap of the box itself. That's just my little MO. But also, the light will not come on until you unscrew the battery pack here and unscrew it all the way, disassemble it. There will be a plastic spacer in there preventing activation in transit. All right, let's talk about the Imalent MS12 Mini's ergonomics. First off, it's all metal construction. It's made out of aluminum. Looks like the tail cap might be made of something different, maybe steel. I'm not sure about that. But the button seems to be metal, I believe. The button seems to kind of rotate a little bit, but it's not an issue. It's just something I noticed. One thing I will say, though, is you got the button here, and you got 1, 2, 3 fans integrated. If you know about the RS50 from Imalent, it had a kind of a shroud that had fans on it, and you had to have this bulky shroud over it. This time they're integrated, so that's a welcome change. But I do think that it's interesting that, and I don't want to oversell this, but the fact that they're equidistant from each other, I found that in the dark, I was kind of rotating it, looking for the button. I mean, the button is flatter. It doesn't feel the same as these, so I don't want to oversell the issue. But what I'm trying to say is from the handle is completely the same all the way around. Doesn't really give me any cues to where the button would be. Now, the light itself feels machined well. The anodization is very, very smooth and even. Got no qualms there. It's got some cutouts, so if this is on, light will leak. Let me go ahead and turn it on and show that. There you go. So they're light leaking from the cutouts on the bezel. And we've got a nice piece of mineral glass here with a anti-reflective coating. Now, when we talk about the Imalent MS12 Mini, I think the part of its name, Mini, is really important because it is a very small light for how many emitters it is. Here is an AceBeam E70, and you can see the light is barely taller. I mean, it is taller, but barely taller than this EDC light. Let's put it next to an 8 emitter light, the Manker MK38, and you can see that they're similar sizes. All right. The AceBeam X50 I found to be very similar in size to the Manker. I don't have it any longer, but I mean, you know, take a look at these two lights and you can get an idea that here we've packed in 12 emitters with the Imalent in the space that AceBeam is packing in 8 in this light. Now, when you do get an AceBeam 12 emitter light, like the X75, you can see how much larger this light is in diameter and how much larger it is in height. It's just a lot bigger light there. And remember that you can't operate this light without the handle. So that is kind of adding to the bulk, whereas this guy, this is it. This is the size. So if size is a consideration, the MS12 is definitely the smallest 12 emitter light on the market right now. All right, let's take a look at the Imalent MS12 Mini's fans. I've got the mic reconfigured for the video so that we're aiming the mic at the fans. I want to do a sound comparison because one of the things I noticed about the Imalent is the fans are kind of loud. So let's take a look at the maker, and I'm going to have all of these the same distance from the microphone, so this should be fair comparison. We're going to take a look at the Fandle from an MF05. We're going to take a look at the Anker MK38 and its Fandle, and then lastly we'll take a look at the AceBeam X75 with its built-in fan in the center of the light. So let's start out with the X75, and let me go ahead and turn on the fan. Okay, so I hit turbo to turn that fan on, and I'll go ahead and turn turbo off now. So that gives you a good idea of how loud the X75 is. Now let's take a look at the Anker MK38, and I will turn its fan on. This is a really quiet fan. Now, it's really quiet, but I'm also going to point out that this one is the one that is probably the most dubious. It's got these two small fans, and they just kind of blow over the bezel here. It doesn't go into a heat sink. It doesn't go inside the light like the Imalent does. So I don't even know how helpful that is, but there is the sound of those fans. And let's take a look at the Fandle, which is a similar style to the Anker. This sits on top of the Astrolux MF05 and just kind of blows over the outside. So again, I don't know how, helpful it is, but let's take a look at its fan sound. Now, this is a lot quieter. This is probably the quietest of all of them, but the diameter of the fan is so big that it's actually pushing a lot of air. Okay, I just aimed it at the mic. Hopefully you picked up how much air it's moving. So it's pretty quiet, but again, I don't laud its design because, again, it's just blowing around the light. So these two, where they're designed with it integrated and they're blowing into the light, it's probably more effective, I'm assuming. And last, let's take a look at the Imalent MS12 Mini. You can see it's pretty loud. So, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying it is what it is. It's pretty loud. So be aware of that if you pick up this light, that when the fans kick on, you know it. All right, let's take a look at the UI. The UI is very straightforward, which is awesome. So first off, click to turn on, click to turn off. Now, there's going to be 5 modes excluding turbo. And when you click it on and press and hold, it's going to cycle through them and go back to low, okay? Now, when you land on a mode and you turn it off, it has mode memory. So since I was on low just then, when I click it, I'll go back to low. Now, the bottom 2 modes don't have mandatory fan, and the top 3 modes have mandatory fan. So when I click, I'll be on low, press and hold to go to the next output, which will not have a fan, then press and hold, and this one will have a fan, and the next one, and finally the highest has a fan. When I press and hold again, it goes back to low, fan turns off. Now, one thing you might be used to from other lights is double tap will go to turbo. So let me double tap. I'm on turbo. If I click off again and then go back on, turbo's not memorized. It'll go back to the last mode I was on. Now, one thing that's different than other lights is usually when you're off and you press and hold, you'll go to an ultra low or a moonlight. Now, let me turn it on and go to a medium mode. Okay, hear the fan. So I went to the medium with fan. Now, what I'm going to show you is if I press and hold, it will actually turn the fans on and there'll be no emitters. You got to hold it for about 3 seconds. All right. So press and hold is not a moonlight or an ultra low like on other lights. It is actually fans only. And what it's used for is if you were using turbo and then you turn the light off and it's still hot, you can turn and force the fans on and let it cool down the light. Now, that will stay on as long as you want. I've turned it on and ran it for an hour before, okay? The fans don't use a lot of current. Expect them to run a long time on the battery. Now, how do you get to the lowest low then if press and hold is the fans? Well, they added a triple click. So remember that I had the medium mode memorized. All right, medium mode. So if I triple click, 1, 2, 3, there's the low. All right. Now, one last thing I'll point out is there's a hidden strobe. And if you go to turbo with a double click, while in turbo, double click again, you get to the hidden strobe. So double click to turbo, then double click again, and there's your strobe. All right, let's set this aside for a second and let's talk about runtimes. Now, the manual here is more like a pamphlet and it's in multiple languages. So it turns out that the only part that's really applicable to us is just this kind of little array here that goes down here. But I want to point out that there is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modes I talked about and turbo. And notice that low claims to be 1500 lumens. Well, when I measured it, I got almost 2,000 lumens. And it says it's going to run for about 4 hours. Now, the middle low, I measured at over 3,000 lumens. And the middle one, I measured at under 5,000. So this is a slight gripe I have about the light, is that the middle low and the middle one are close enough in spacing that it's kind of like an extra mode I have to go through for no reason. Then middle 2 is about 13,000 lumens. I rated it a little lower in the lumen section, and you're going to get just under an hour runtime at that rate. Then the high should be 25,000 lumens for 3 minutes, which I rated a little less than that. And then it steps down to this middle 2 rate for the remainder of the 43 minutes. And then turbo is a similar thing where it goes 45 seconds at the highest it can go. And then it steps down to the 13,000 lumens, which is this middle 2 rate for the remaining 40 minutes. All right, let's talk about batteries and charging. So it comes with this AC adapter. Make sure you get the one for your region. I got the US version. And on the other end, it's got a DC plug. This kind of cylindrical plug is called a DC plug. And the DC plug is hidden on the back of the light right here. You just kind of unscrew this and it comes off. And the DC plug just goes right in there. I'll show that right now. So let's go ahead and plug this in to the outlet off screen. And let me then put this in here, and you'll see that it'll go red to show that it's charging, and then it turns green when it's done. Now, it's a relatively fast charger. I wouldn't say the fastest ever. It took me about 3-4 hours when it was pretty depleted. I can't see it taking much longer than that, but it's definitely not like an hour kind of thing. It's about 3 to 4 hours. Now, the battery itself is a battery pack, and it's inside this tube right here. I'll go ahead and take it off so you can take a look at it. Here's the head. Here is the battery pack. It's completely sealed and proprietary. So I know from what Imalent tells me that there's 4 21700s in there. Battery packs like this are kind of off-putting to some users, but I think that with these monster flutters, it's kind of a normal thing because, you forgo all those springs, all the batteries can be wired directly. There's this really beefy tab here that acts like the biggest spring bypass ever to make huge contact for the high amps required to put out those maximum lumens. So let's get a look at the lumens on the lumen tube here. So let's go to our first lowest mode by triple tapping. So 1, 2, 3. And we can see that we're getting about almost 1900 lumens on the lowest mode. Now let's press and hold. We'll go up a mode and I'm out of my range. So now we can see that we're at 3,500 lumens for the next mode. Press and hold again. And then we're going to get the fan now. We can see that we're at 4,200 in lumens, 4,300 lumens. Let's press and hold again. Now we're at 10,000 lumens on the nose. And then we should have one more mode. Press and hold. And we're off range. There we go. 22,000 lumens plus or minus I measure. And lastly, and then if I press and hold, it goes back down to low. We're going to take it off the lumen tube here, let the light cool, and then we're going to do the turbo lumen test. And finally, let's check out turbo. So let's get a nice seal here. Remember, this is times 100 right now. So I'll click it on, and then turbo. All right, so we hit about 60,000 for a split second. And we are now about 10 seconds in. We're going to go for 30 seconds to get ANSI. And we are now 20 seconds in. We're still at 51,000. It's dropping slower than I thought. This is pretty good. And we're coming up at ANSI right and now. So about 40,000. 40,000 lumens is what I got at ANSI. But here's something to note. This light is super hot, right around the button even. So I'm going to press and hold. Oh, that hurts. Okay, press and hold to keep the fan on so that this thing can be, oh wow. It smells hot. It smells like electronic hot. So I'm going to leave this on, and I'll see you in the next segment, which is tint. All right, let's do some tint measurements. Kind of weird to do tint measurements on a light that isn't about tint at all. It's just about flood and output. But I'm doing it because it also lets me bring up the situation where there's 3 different models. There is a XHP 70.2 in 6500 Kelvin, which is what I have here. That will be the one that's the brightest and has the most throw. Then there's a 5000 Kelvin version, and that'll be more natural to your eyes, a little warmer, but it pulls back on the lumens a little bit. And then there is an XHP 70.3, which I haven't tested at all. It should be domeless, which might mean a little more throw, but it's going to be less output. I know that on my AceBeam E70 here, I replaced the 70.2 emitter with a 70.3, both at 5000K, and the lumens went from about 4200 down to about 3600. So that's a sizable hit, maybe about 25%. Let's turn down the video lights and take a look at the tint measurement. I'll do it at 3 rates here. I'll do it at the lowest, a medium, and the turbo. So here, 1, 2, 3. All right, so here is the lowest it goes. Let me get a measurement here, and we are seeing it at about 5,500K and about 81 points above the BBL. Let me go up 2 modes to the fanned medium. Let's measure it again. All right, now we're approaching 6,000. That's about 5862 Kelvin. And you can see it's getting a little closer to BBL. And now let's hit turbo. And we can see that it's cooled off a lot. It's gotten to 6,300. That's where the 6,500 rating comes from, and it's actually below BBL a little bit. Now, I want to point out that the tint is not going to be green because when it's this cool, the green or being above BBL actually kind of looks like a purple. So that's probably another reason to get the 6500 version if you don't mind how cool it is. I also want to point one other thing out. While I despise 6500K in an EDC, I find that with an ultra flutter like this, the coolness doesn't bother me. It's just so bright and so much like daylight that my brain just doesn't seem to care that it's 6500K. I would never say that about an indoor EDC, but I am finding that's true for these mega flutters that I've been using. We're going to go outside and use the following 4 lights for beam shots. The Sophrin BLF SP36 Anduril. It's got quad LH351D Samsung emitters. Then we're going to use the AceBeam E70. That's a single XHP 70.3 emitter. Then we're going to use the Manker MK38 with 8 XHP 70.2 LEDs. And then finally, the Imalent MS12 with 12 XHP 70.2 6500K emitters. Okay, it's time for some beam shots. Let's start with the Sophrin SP36 BLF Enduril, and this is a quad emitter with LH351D Samsungs. Let's go straight to turbo, and it's a very throwy light, and it's really great light. I just did a little quick 5-minute review on this light on the channel, and there at the back of the street you can see that it's really reaching those 4 palm trees. It's really reaching those 4 palm trees that are 150 meters away. Okay, so this light is 3,600 lumens sustained. Now let's take a look at the AceBeam E70. This was originally an XHP 70.2 Cree emitter, and I put an XHP 70.3 in it. It's a 5,000 temperature, and let's go to turbo, and it's a great little EDC. It's coming in at about 3,800 lumens, 3,600 lumens, somewhere in there, and it's kind of floody. It's got a really shallow emitter here, and I'm not really making those 4 palm trees in the back too well, but it's reaching the middle of the street okay, but just not really getting the back like I want to. Now we're going to take a look at the Manker MK38 satellite. This has got the 8 Cree 70.2 emitters in 5,000K temperature. Let's go straight to turbo. Wow, that's a bright light. And you can see that it's definitely reaching those trees in the back and flooding the entire street. Now the camera exposure is locked and the white balance is locked at 5,000K. Let's take a look at the Imalent MS12 Mini on turbo. Oh wow, it's like daylight. Amazing, amazing. Okay, let's take a look at the MK38 versus the MS12 Mini. I'll turn them both on at once, and then I'll go right hand, left hand. So we'll start with the MK38. So here's the MK38, and here's the MS12. MK38 and MS12. So here's the MK38, and here's the MS12. MK38 and MS12. All right, let me give you my conclusion and final thoughts on the Imalent MS12 Mini. This is a crap load of lumens in a very tiny light. I mean, relatively tiny, right? But here's the thing. At the price point it's at, it is in the same range as the MK38 and the X75 from AceBeam. Now, between the MK38 and the Imalent, I mean, this puts out more lumens. So if you want the most amount of lumens you can get in a small package, this is it. And also, even though you can remove this handle, I just want to point out that when you do, these are basically the same size, okay? Now, with the X70 is probably a better performer, and if you're worried that I didn't show it in the street with the beam shots, that's because I'll have a separate video later. I did do that casually before. I've already taken a look, and you know, these are such high lumen amounts that they both just look like daylight. I will do a video and let you guys be the judge, but I just don't think that even though they're a similar price, that these are in the same class. One is a lot larger than the other, and one mandates this extra footprint of the handle. So you might be thinking, well, I don't care. It's a giant light. Let's just go to this size. I'm kind of like that. I believe that. So this is a great light. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are going to want to put this in a duffel bag or put this in a backpack. And this operates as is without the handle in a smaller footprint with the 12 Cree emitters. So if that's what you're looking for, the smallest light you can get with 12 XHP 70.2 emitters from Cree, then look no further than the Imalent MS12 Mini. It's the only light in its class with 12 emitters at this form factor. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really matters to me. And I'll see you in the next video.